Yeah, so I'm Freddie Otto. I'm now a senior lecturer at the Grantham Institute at Imperial College London, which is not the same as the Grantham Institute at as LSE, but they are working close together, the two Grantham Institutes. And I have been working for a decade now as a climate scientist, in particularly on answering the question whether and to what extent human-caused climate change alters extreme weather events. And I have, together with my colleague Geert Jan Van Oldenborgh, we have developed an initiative which is called World Weather Attribution, where we tried and answer that question, what the role of climate change is in an individual extreme event when the events happen. So in the weeks and months after the event occur, so that the scientific evidence can be part of the public discussion of that extreme event. And yeah, so we started that work in 2014 and have been working on this project together ever since, until Geert Jan passed away last week. When we started, yeah, go ahead.
Continue.
No, ask your question.
No, I wanted to find out what really brought about that attribution. What came to mind that you had to come together to bring that on board?
So extreme weather events are, of course, often linked to losses and damages and cause huge suffering for the people experiencing that weather. And we have also known for a long time that human-caused climate change will manifest through the changing intensity and likelihood of extreme weather. But for a very long time, the scientific community has, when extreme events were happening and the question was asked, what's the role of climate change? There were two kinds of answers that the scientific community would give. The first one was that you can't attribute individual weather events. And the second one was that, well, we are living in a changing climate. So of course, this event is happening in a changing climate, and climate change will have some influence. And the latter is trivially true, but it doesn't tell you anything about what the role is. Does it make it more likely or less likely, and by how much? And so that was a big gap in what climate scientific research could do. And it also, we had observations on the one hand showing how things are changing on the ground, and then we had climate models and the community working with climate models on the other hand, looking into the future. But we didn't have any information of how these two come together in the present. So, and that's why we started to work on trying to answer these questions scientifically. So we started to do that in just standard scientific research, writing papers, submitting them to peer reviews. 2 years later, you have a published paper.
Okay, so what changes has this service brought to the climate world? We would want to understand that. I mean, after you brought this on board, have we seen some positive changes to the climate world?
Well, I think we are now, thanks to this work and this event attribution work that we have been doing, we now know much better what climate change actually means today and where we see how much change already, which And I think that has been particularly highlighted in the last IPCC report that was published in August, where for the first time we have an overview of climate change through changing likelihood and intensity of extreme events on a regional scale. And that has, I think it has really brought home that climate change is not something that's happening somewhere else and sometime in the future, but that it actually is already here and everywhere, and that in all societies, it's the most vulnerable in these societies that are paying the price of climate change already. So I think that understanding is something that we didn't have before we had the science. I think what is really the next thing that needs to happen is from this recognition to actually action, and that hasn't happened yet. And so I think one big thing that we really need to see is that adaptation gets put on equal footing to mitigation in the international climate talks, and that also climate finance is actually not just there in words, but in actual in actual monetary terms.
So before I come to the life of late Van, what is so unique about recent IPCC report, I mean, compared to the previous ones? Because people assume, or they think that there is nothing new about the report, and it becomes so unnecessary. According to people, those who have gone through the report, they are saying it becomes unnecessary when we keep on coming out with reports all the time without something new in it.
Well, I think there is definitely some truth in that a lot of the things that are in the report we have known for a very long time, but we still haven't acted on them. And we have known for a very long time that burning fossil fuels will warm the climate, and that this has detrimental effects on lives and livelihoods of people around the world. And we have now a lot more evidence of how exactly these detrimental effects play out. So how exactly are different types of extreme events changing? So that is new. That we don't need a new IPCC report to know that we need to stop burning fossil fuels. We have known that for a very long time. And so I think there are probably a lot more efficient ways of updating what is really new, rather than all the time writing these massive reports. But there are some new things, and one important new thing is this much better information on regional scales, on how extremes and also other climatic impact drivers are changing. We now state it's a fact that the burning of fossil fuels leads to warming the climate, which of course is, from a scientific point of view, really not interesting, because we have also, before it was stated as a fact, it was clear. But politically, that is important to see that every time we ask these questions, we get more and more certain about the answers. But I think probably the most important new message from the latest IPCC report is that we now know that when we get to net zero CO2 emissions globally, temperatures will actually stop rising. And that was not known so well before, because there are feedbacks like thawing of permafrost and so on, which could have led to temperatures still increasing even when we reach net zero. And that we are now quite certain that that's not the case is, I think, really important, because that means that we have it really in our hands to stop the warming.
Okay. All right, thank you so much. So let's look at the late Ms. Van. How was your relationship with him?
I would say we were a dream team. So we were colleagues and friends, and we developed world weather attribution together, and so we worked a lot and very closely together, and we had both the same passion. We wanted to do science that answers questions that people actually have, and but we had very different skill sets, so we were quite complementary in that. So Geert Jan was he was an extremely fantastic statistician, so he was very, very good with the numbers, with the statistical methods, and I'm good with words. I'm good at translating scientific findings into words and messages that that are understandable. And so we worked very well together on this, and we also both were really, we find it both extremely important to also reach out to the people who are affected by the events, so that we do speak to all the journalists that want to speak to us and want to understand what we are doing, but also that we can't do an attribution study about an extreme event without involving people who have experienced this extreme event. So every time when we did the study, so when we did a study on the extreme heat wave in Canada this summer, we were working with people in the Met offices in Canada. So at the moment, we are working on the drought in Madagascar. And so we're working with people from the Met office in Madagascar, because, we don't know everything. we are not experts on the weather everywhere, but the people who work in these parts of the world, they are the experts. They know best what aspects of the weather are actually most relevant. And I think that so trying to make our science, our way of working, as inclusive as possible was also really important for both of us.
What would you miss about him? It's been a week since he passed on.
Oh, what do I not miss? So I think what I will probably most miss is just the fun he brought to the work. So for him, work was just what he loved doing, and so it was always great fun. And he would make jokes, and he would just send a quick text when he found something somewhat related. And but I will also really, really miss having someone I can absolutely trust, in where I can ask, what do you think about this? Should we do this? Should we not do this? Do you think these results look right? Do you think we should talk to whoever? All these questions that constantly come up. With Geert Jan, I had someone I could absolutely trust to tell me what he thinks, what he honestly thinks, because he was very honest. He would never mince words. He would if he thinks that's a stupid idea, he would say that's a stupid idea. And so that was, and especially in a scientific field where it's a small field and there are few jobs, and so there is quite a lot of competition, and there are not that many people you can truly trust. So that's something that was really, that I would very much miss. And of course, his formidable cleverness.
Do you know if he had some plans for the climate world that he couldn't achieve?
So yes, so one thing that we were always not so happy with our studies in world weather attribution was that, well, we always work with people from the Red Cross and people who, and we always have information about vulnerability and exposure in our studies. They never really made it into the newspapers. So our studies, when they were reported in the media, were quite often just numbers on just the hazard, just the climate point of view, but not enough about the vulnerability. And I think that was something that worried him, and that he felt we should need to do better. So that is something that we have to do better. And also, although it's often more difficult because it's more difficult to get data and so on, he strongly felt that we were doing too many studies in the global north and not enough in the global south. So I think that's also something that he really, that balance he wanted to get better.
Thank you so much. I'm so grateful for this information about Mr. Van. That's so sad. Yeah. But let's look at the world in general. Do you think we're going to have someone to replace Mr. Van? I mean, for a very long time?
I don't think he is replaceable, but he has taught his skills to many people. So he has, he was always very generous with his time. And methods he had developed, he would teach them. And so the last years, he has worked very closely with two scientists at his institution who have learned a great deal from him. So Xiaoqi Philip and Sarah Q. And so they will definitely take his work forward at his institute in the Netherlands. Of course, they are no replacement from him, because he has just a huge amount of expertise and everything he learned over the years, and that no one has. And also his character was quite unique. But many people have known him, and he has worked with many people around the world, and his integrity and his values he actually taught to a lot of people. So I think there is a lot of Geert Jan still out there, in many different people, not in one person. So there will never be the one person that will replace him. But I think his legacy is important, and is something that that will live and continue to grow.
All right. Thank you so much for your time. I'm so grateful. Your final words?
Sorry?
Your final words to the whole world about the climate science, and what we need to do now that we have a report from the IPCC. What do you expect from all of us across the world?
Well, we need to stop burning fossil fuels. I think that's we need to stop finding excuses and really stop changing our global economic system away from fossil fuels. But we also need to recognize that climate change is not affecting everyone in the same way, but it's in every society, it's the most vulnerable that are currently already paying the price. So if we don't acknowledge that climate change is an equity and justice problem, most for all, and not a physical problem, we will not be able to solve it.
Thank you so much. I'm so grateful. I'm looking forward to working with you one day, probably in the near future when I'm done with my study.
That's really interesting, because I know a lot of people who moved from climate science to journalism, but not really the other way around. Oh, I think it's fantastic. I think the more people work in climate science who come from different backgrounds, the better the science will be. So I think it's fantastic. I wish you all the best of luck with your studies, and yeah, I'm sure our path will cross again.
Thank you so much. I'll keep in touch.
Bye.
All right.